Hello everyone, and welcome to my General Hospital official channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up.
The air in the hospital corridor was a specific kind of sterile, smelling of antiseptic, floor wax, and an underlying, unnameable tension. It was a smell Anna Devane had become all too familiar with over the past few weeks, a scent that clung to her clothes and her memory. Today, however, it felt different. It felt heavy, charged with a dread she couldn't quite place. She walked slowly, her hand trailing against the cool, painted cinderblock wall, a gesture of both support and a desperate need to feel something solid, something real. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, a monotonous drone that seemed to sync with the frantic, yet muffled, beating of her own heart. She was heading back to her room after a session of physical therapy, her body aching with a profound weariness that sleep never seemed to cure. The doctors called it fatigue, a common side effect of her condition. They used careful, clinical language, words designed to comfort and obfuscate in equal measure. Unexplained neurological episodes, metabolic fluctuations, anomalous cellular activity. To Anna, it felt less like a medical condition and more like a slow, insidious unraveling. One moment she was the formidable, sharp-witted former WSB agent, the head of the PCPD. The next, she was a prisoner in her own body, betrayed by limbs that wouldn't obey and a mind that sometimes felt like it was wrapped in thick, suffocating cotton. It had started subtly. A tremor in her hand she'd attributed to too much caffeine. A sudden, dizzying spell in the middle of the police precinct, which she'd blamed on low blood sugar. Then came the gaps in her memory, moments where she would lose minutes, sometimes hours, only to find herself in a different location with no recollection of how she got there. The final straw was the collapse, a full-body seizure that had left her unconscious on the floor of her own home. Finn, ever the vigilant son, had found her. The panic in his eyes when she woke up in the hospital was a mirror of the terror she felt clawing at her own throat. General Hospital had become her world. The world outside, the scheming of Port Charles, the dangers posed by pikemen, the daily operations of the police department, had all faded into a distant, muffled reality. Her world was now this corridor, this room, these tests. So many tests. Blood draws at all hours, MRIs, CT scans, spinal taps that left her with a throbbing headache for days. They were searching for an answer, a pathogen, a toxin, a genetic marker, anything that could explain the rapid and bizarre deterioration of a woman who had always been the picture of strength and resilience. As she reached her room, she saw Finn standing just outside, deep in conversation with Dr. Britt Westbourne. Their body language was tense, a closed-off circle of professional concern that sent a fresh chill down Anna's spine. Finn's brow was furrowed, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. Britt was gesturing with a patient chart, her expression grim. Just doesn't align with any known presentation, Britt was saying, her voice low. The protein markers are aberrant. It's as if her cellular metabolism is being rewritten in real time. Finn ran a hand through his hair. There has to be a trigger. A poison, an environmental factor, something. The body doesn't just decide to do this. Anna cleared her throat softly, and both doctors turned, their faces instantly smoothing into masks of professional calm. It was a transformation she had grown to despise. Anna, Finn said, stepping forward and taking her arm gently. How was PT? Exhausting, she admitted, allowing him to guide her back into her room and into the bedside chair. It feels like I'm trying to command someone else's body. The signals get lost somewhere between my brain and my muscles. Britt gave her a small, sympathetic smile. We're going to figure this out, Anna. We're running more specialized panels. We've sent samples to a specialized lab in Switzerland. They have equipment we can only dream of. Switzerland? Anna asked, her interest piqued despite her fatigue. What are they looking for? It's a long shot, Finn interjected quickly, a little too quickly. They specialize in identifying novel synthetic compounds. Things that wouldn't show up on a standard toxicology report. The way he said synthetic sent another, deeper tremor of fear through her. Synthetic implied design. It implied intent. For weeks, she had been grappling with the possibility of a random, cruel twist of fate, a rare disease, a genetic time bomb. the idea of a deliberate act, of a poison tailored specifically for her, was a different kind of horror altogether. Later that evening, after Finn and Britt had left, Anna was alone with her thoughts. The setting sun cast long, distorted shadows across the room, turning the familiar medical equipment into monstrous silhouettes. She tried to read a book, a mystery novel she'd brought from home, but the words swam on the page, their meaning elusive. Her mind kept circling back to the conversation she'd overheard. Aberrant protein markers. Rewritten cellular metabolism. Synthetic compounds. Her training, the instincts she had honed over decades in the field, began to stir from their medically induced slumber. This wasn't just an illness. This had the fingerprints of something else, something calculated. She thought about her enemies. The list was, unfortunately, long. Her work with the WSB had left a trail of vengeful individuals and powerful organizations. Her current work with the Pikeman investigation had put a target on her back. But who would go to these lengths? This wasn't a bullet or a bomb, it was something far more insidious, something designed to dismantle her from the inside out, to make her suffer, to make her a puzzle that even the best doctors couldn't solve. A soft knock on the door pulled her from her dark reverie. It was Valentine Cassadine. He looked tired, his usual impeccable suit jacket slung over his arm, his shirt sleeves rolled up. In his hand, he held a brown paper bag from the hospital cafeteria. "I come bearing gifts," he said, his voice a low, warm rumble that was oddly comforting. Or, more accurately, a marginally edible turkey sandwich and a cup of tea that has likely been steeping since this morning. Anna managed a genuine smile. "Valentine. You didn't have to." "Of course I did," he said, pulling a chair up beside her. "I can't stand the thought of you here alone, subsisting on jello and worry." He unpacked the sandwich and the tea, setting them on her bedside table. His presence was a solid, grounding force in the swirling uncertainty of her room. She took a small bite of the sandwich, her appetite non-existent, but touched by his gesture. "They're sending my blood to Switzerland," she said quietly, watching his reaction. Valentine stilled. "Switzerland? Why?" "Finn thinks it might be a synthetic poison. Something designed not to be detected." The color drained from Valentine's face. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped tightly together. "Anna, that's terrifying," she finished for him. "Yes. It is. It means someone has gone to a great deal of trouble to do this to me. This isn't an accident, Valentine. This is an attack." His jaw tightened. "I've had my own people looking into your recent cases, your movements. I've found nothing. No suspicious characters, no forced entry at your home, no tampering with your food or drink. It's as if this agent appeared out of thin air. Or was administered in a way I would never suspect," Anna murmured, her gaze drifting to the window, to the twinkling lights of Port Charles coming to life in the dusk. "A letter? An item of clothing? An aerosol?" The possibilities were endless, and each one felt more violating than the last. Valentine was silent for a long moment, his expression darkening with a storm of thoughts. "There is a disturbing precedent for this," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "A history my family would rather forget." Anna turned to look at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. "The Cassadines?" He gave a slow, grim nod. "My family's legacy is not just one of wealth and power, Anna. It is also a legacy of experimentation. Of pushing the boundaries of science into very dark places. Mikos, in particular, was obsessed with control. Not just control through fear or finance, but direct, biological control. He funded Black Ops research into targeted biological agents. Things that could incapacitate, manipulate, or eliminate a target without a trace. They called it the Silent Sanction Program. A cold knot tightened in Anna's stomach. The Cassadine name was synonymous with villainy in her world, but this was a new layer of depravity. "You think this is connected to that?" "I don't know," Valentine admitted, his voice heavy. "The program was supposed to have been dismantled decades ago. The research destroyed. But secrets have a way of resurfacing, especially Cassidy's secrets. And you, my dear Anna, have been a thorn in the side of that family for a very, very long time. The pieces were beginning to form a horrifying picture. Her illness wasn't random. It was a sophisticated, scientific assault. It was a Cassidy-style revenge, updated for the modern era. No dramatic declarations of war, no mustache-twirling villains tying her to railroad tracks. Just a silent, invisible weapon working its way through her bloodstream, corrupting her neural pathways, turning her own body into her torturer. The next few days were a blur of escalating fear and deepening mystery. The results from Switzerland came back, and they were as baffling as they were terrifying. The lab had identified a novel chiral compound bonded to her red blood cells, a substance unlike anything in their extensive database. It was a designer molecule, incredibly complex, engineered to interfere with mitochondrial function and neurotransmitter production. In layman's terms, it was slowly shutting down her body's energy production and scrambling the signals in her brain. It was, as Finn explained with a voice trembling with a mixture of rage and horror, a masterpiece of malicious science. The treatment was palliative at best. They tried chelation therapy to strip the compound from her blood, but it was too deeply integrated into her cellular structure. They tried a cocktail of powerful neurostimulants and metabolic boosters, but the effects were short-lived, and the side effects were brutal. Anna felt herself fading, a little more each day. The world took on a hazy, dreamlike quality. She had vivid, terrifying hallucinations, shadows moving in the corners of her room, the faces of nurses morphing into the sneering visage of Nico's Cassidine, the sound of her own heartbeat echoing like a drum in a vast, empty cavern. During a moment of lucidity, she found herself gripping Finn's hand with a strength she didn't know she still possessed. "Finn," she whispered, her throat raw. "This isn't medicine. This is an experiment. They're not trying to cure me. They're observing." Finn's eyes widened in alarm. "Anna, no. That's the paranoia talking. It's a symptom. We are trying everything we can to save you." But she saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes. He was a brilliant doctor, and he knew that her theory, while born of delirium, was not entirely without merit. The compound's behavior was unprecedented. Its resistance to conventional treatment was instructive. It was as if they were all participants in a live trial, with Anna as the unwitting subject. The real breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Damien Spinelli, hacker extraordinaire and loyal friend. He visited her one afternoon, his usual exuberance subdued by the sight of her in the hospital bed. He brought his laptop, a modern-day knight with his digital shield. "I've been digging, elusive one," he said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "Following the digital breadcrumbs. That lab in Switzerland? It's not just any lab. It's a front. A very sophisticated, very well-funded front." Anna propped herself up on her pillows, a spark of her old self igniting. "A front for what?" Spinelli's face was illuminated by the cool blue light of his screen. "The financial trail is a labyrinth of shell corporations and offshore accounts, but the Jackal, in his infinite cyber wisdom, has pierced the veil. The funding for that lab, and for the research that likely produced this molecular monstrosity, it all leads back to a single, shadowy holding company." He paused for dramatic effect, his eyes meeting Anna's. "A holding company that is a subsidiary of a larger conglomerate, which was, until very recently, a major, silent investor in a certain pharmaceutical research division, a division that was quietly purchased and absorbed 6 months ago by..." He took a deep breath. "The Cassidine Group." There it was. The final, damning piece of evidence. It wasn't just a relic of Nikos' old research. It was active. It was current. And Valentine's own company was involved, whether he knew it or not. The shock of the revelation was like a bucket of ice water. It cleared the fog from her mind for a precious, painful moment. This was bigger than a personal vendetta. This was a testing ground. She was the proof of concept. If this compound could take down a highly trained, physically fit former agent like Anna Devane, who was also under the constant care of top-tier medical professionals, then it was a formidable weapon indeed. It could be used against politicians, activists, rival business leaders, anyone who stood in the way of Cassadine interests. They could be incapacitated, driven mad, or killed, and it would be diagnosed as a rare, untreatable illness. The perfect, undetectable crime. Spinelli, Anna said, her voice gaining a new, steely strength. I need you to get a message to Valentine. And to Robert. Tell them it's the silent sanction. They'll know what it means. The following hours were a whirlwind of clandestine activity. Robert Scorpio, her oldest friend and former partner, arrived at the hospital, his face a granite mask of fury and determination. He was briefed by a frantic Finn and a pale Valentine, who was reeling from the implication that his own corporate empire had been weaponized against the woman he loved. This ends now, Robert growled, the authority of a former WSB director in his voice. We're not treating a disease anymore, we're countering a hostile act. We need the antidote. And to get an antidote, we need the source. Valentine, his Cassadine cunning now fully engaged, began pulling strings from the shadows. He used his contacts, his wealth, and his intimate knowledge of his family's Byzantine corporate structure to apply pressure. He initiated a hostile internal audit of the research division, freezing its assets and demanding all project data. It was a dangerous game, one that could get him killed, but the look of sheer devastation on Anna's face had stripped him of all caution. Meanwhile, Robert and Spinelli worked on a parallel track. Using the data Spinelli had extracted, they identified a lead researcher, a brilliant but amoral biochemist named Dr. Eris Thorne, who had been the head of the project. He had gone to ground after the compound was deployed, but no one can truly disappear from the combined forces of the WSB and the world's greatest hacker. They found him in a safe house just outside Albany. Robert, with a team of his most trusted operatives, brought him in. The interrogation was short and not particularly sweet. Thorne, faced with the prospect of spending the rest of his life in a maximum security prison with no hope of parole, quickly folded. He confirmed everything. The project, codenamed Arachne, was indeed a revival of the old silent sanction program. Anna Devane had been selected as the primary field test. She was considered a high-value, high-resilience target, perfect for stress testing the compound's efficacy. Most importantly, he gave them the biochemical sequence for the antidote. It was a counteragent, a messenger RNA strand that would instruct her cells to produce enzymes that would dismantle the synthetic compound, breaking it down into harmless, excretable components. The antidote was synthesized in a secure, WSB-affiliated lab and flown to General Hospital under armed guard. The moment it arrived, the atmosphere in Anna's room shifted from one of despair to one of breathless, terrified hope. Finn, his hands steady despite the monumental pressure, prepared the injection. Anna looked around the room at the faces gathered there, Finn, his eyes full of a son's love and a doctor's fervent hope, Robert, the brother of her heart, his jaw set with grim determination, Valentine, his love for her painful, open-wound in his gaze, and Britt, the consummate professional, ready to monitor every vital sign. This is it, Anna, Finn said softly, holding the syringe. This should reverse the process. It will likely be intense. Your body will have to purge the toxin rapidly. She gave a slight, weak nod. She was beyond fear now. She was ready for the fight, ready to reclaim her body, her mind, her life. She met Valentine's eyes and saw the unspoken apology there. She gave him a small, forgiving smile. This was not his fault. The sins of the Cassadine family were a burden he carried, but he had proven, time and again, that he was not one of them. As Finn administered the antidote, a warm, strange sensation spread from the injection site up her arm. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, it was as if a circuit that had been dead for weeks suddenly flared back to life. A jolt of pure, undiluted energy shot through her. Her back arched off the bed as a seizure, this one a violent, purging catharsis, racked her body. Monitors screamed in alarm. Finn and Britt moved with practiced efficiency, stabilizing her, supporting her through the storm. It felt like her very cells were at war. Fire and ice raced through her veins. The hallucinations returned, more vivid and terrifying than ever, a spiderweb of darkness shattering in her mind's eye, the ghost of Mikos Cassadine screaming in silent fury as his creation was undone. She could feel the corrupting compound, like a slick, oily film coating her nerves, being forcibly stripped away, dissolved by the microscopic cavalry now coursing through her. The process felt like an eternity, but in reality, it lasted only a few minutes. When the convulsions finally subsided, Anna collapsed back onto the pillows, drenched in sweat, gasping for air. But the air felt different. It felt clean. The oppressive, cottony fog that had filled her head for weeks was gone. The constant, low-level pain in her joints had vanished. Her mind was her own again, sharp, clear, and terrifyingly aware. She blinked, her vision focusing on the concerned faces leaning over her. She took a deep, shuddering breath, the first full, unlabored breath she had taken in a month. "Anna?" Finn's voice was tentative, hopeful. She looked at him, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, her smile was not an effort. It was real. It was Anna. "I'm here," she said, her voice hoarse but steady, filled with a strength that had been stolen from her. "I'm back." The relief in the room was palpable, a physical force that seemed to push back the walls of the hospital room. Robert let out a choked laugh, clapping a hand on Finn's shoulder. Valentine sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking with the force of his emotion. But as the immediate crisis passed, a new kind of tension settled in its place. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. Anna was alive, but she had been used. Her body had been a battlefield, a laboratory. The violation was profound, a psychic wound that would take far longer to heal than her physical one. She was no longer just a patient. She was a victim, a witness, and now, most dangerously, the one who had survived. She knew the truth. The Cassidines, or at least a faction of them, were not just playing with money and power anymore. They were playing with the very building blocks of life, weaponizing biology itself. And they had chosen her to be their test subject. As the days turned into a week, Anna's recovery was remarkably swift. The antidote had worked perfectly, flushing the last vestiges of the compound from her system. Her strength returned, her coordination restored. She was herself again, but she was also someone new. Someone who had stared into the abyss of modern scientific warfare and seen her own reflection. Sitting in a chair by the window, finally dressed in her own clothes, she looked out at the city of Port Charles. It looked the same, but she knew it was not. The familiar skyline now hid unseen threats, the ordinary citizens below were potential targets in a war they didn't know was being waged. Valentine entered the room quietly. "The car is ready whenever you are," he said. She turned to him. "It's not over, Valentine." "I know," he replied, his voice grim. "Thorne is talking, but he's a foot soldier. The people who gave the order, who greenlit this project, they are still in the shadows. My internal audit has hit a wall. Powerful people are protecting this secret." Anna stood up, her posture straight, her gaze steady. The former agent was back, and she was angrier than ever. "Then we will drag them into the light. They made a fatal error, Valentine." "What error was that?" he asked. "They tested their weapon on me," Anna said, her voice low and dangerous. "And I survived. Now I know their playbook. I felt their weapon. And I will spend every last breath I have making sure that no one else ever has to go through what I did. This silent sanction ends here. It ends with us." She picked up her bag and walked out of the hospital room, not as a convalescing patient, but as a soldier returning to the front lines. The shock of what had been done to her had subsided, replaced by a cold, burning resolve. The animal testing was over. The subject had not only survived the experiment, she had learned from it. And now, she was coming for her captors. The real battle for Port Charles, a battle fought not with guns but with genomes, had just begun. The week in Port Charles takes a dark and shocking turn as Anna Devane finds herself at the center of a disturbing mystery that no one saw coming. The brilliant former spy, always on the side of justice and truth, now becomes an unwilling subject in a chilling experiment that could alter her life forever. What begins as a routine investigation quickly spirals into a psychological nightmare, one that blurs the line between science, manipulation, and revenge. Anna has always been strong, the kind of woman who could face down any threat. But lately, something feels off. Her instincts are clouded, her reactions are slower, and there's a strange, nagging pain she can't shake. It started with dizziness, then fatigue, then vivid dreams that don't feel like her own. When she confides in Valentine, his brow furrows in concern. Anna, you're not making sense. You're saying you're hearing things? Seeing flashes of images that don't belong to you, he asks quietly, his hand brushing against hers in an attempt to ground her. Anna looks up, her eyes glistening with confusion. It's more than that, Valentine. I can feel memories, but they're not mine. Something's been done to me. At first, Valentine assumes it's stress. After all, Anna's been through hell recently, haunted by the WSB's betrayal, the secrets of her past, and the constant threats to her safety. But when a medical checkup reveals strange anomalies in her blood work, the truth begins to unfold in terrifying layers. Dr. Portia Robinson calls Valentine into her office, her expression grim. There's something very unusual going on, she says carefully, tapping the report. Anna's blood contains traces of a compound that shouldn't be in a human body. It's synthetic, something designed for advanced biological research. Experimental. Valentine's voice drops, icy and low. Are you telling me someone has been using Anna as a test subject? Portia exhales, nodding reluctantly. That's exactly what I'm saying. Meanwhile, Anna sits in the exam room, her hands trembling. Testing? On me, she whispers, the words tasting bitter and unreal. Who would do this? Portia hesitates before answering. Whoever it is had access to high-level lab resources. This isn't something done in a back alley. This is organized, precise, and deliberate. Back at Anna's home, Valentine pours her a drink as she paces restlessly. I thought I left all this behind, she mutters, her voice tight with fear and anger. Spying, manipulation, experiments, it's all coming back, isn't it? Valentine steps closer. Whoever's behind this, they underestimated you. We'll find them. Together. Anna stops and looks up at him. What if it's too late, Valentine? What if they've already changed me? Across town, at the hospital lab, Hamilton Finn and Elizabeth Weber discover that Anna's test results link to another confidential case, one involving a series of stolen research samples from the CDC. Finn's eyes widen as he scrolls through the data. This can't be a coincidence, he mutters. These compounds, they're the same ones used in neural adaptation testing. Originally meant for animal trials. Liz's jaw drops. Wait, are you saying what I think you're saying? Finn nods grimly. The project was shut down years ago because it was too dangerous. Now it looks like someone's revived it, and they're using Anna as the subject. When Finn informs Anna, she's silent for a long moment. Then, in a barely audible voice, she says, they've moved from animals to me. Valentine clenches his fists. Over my dead body. Anna looks away, tears forming as she whispers, that's exactly what they want, Valentine. They want to break me. The tension in Port Charles rises as the investigation deepens. Curtis and Jordan join in after learning that one of the shell corporations funding the experimental program is tied to the same network that once manipulated Drew Kane's memory mapping. Jordan meets with Anna privately at the Metro Court. You know this goes way deeper than anyone wants to admit, Jordan warns. These people, whoever they are, they're not just experimenting on you. You're part of something bigger. Maybe even a new version of the Chimera project. Anna's eyes narrow. Then it's not just about me. It's about control. Meanwhile, Valentine reaches out to an old contact in the WSB, hoping for information, but he's stonewalled. Later that night, he confronts a shadowy figure on the pier. You know something, Valentine says, his voice sharp as glass. The man smirks. You don't want to dig too deep, Cassadine. What they've done to her, it's irreversible. Valentine lunges forward, gripping the man's collar. If she dies, so do you. In the hospital, Anna's condition worsens. She begins to experience blackouts and hallucinations, visions of a sterile lab, voices whispering commands. During one episode, she collapses in the hallway, crying out for help as flashes of cold metal tables and blinding lights flood her mind. "Make it stop!" she screams. Nurses rush to her aid, but she pushes them away, trembling. "They're inside my head!" Later, as Anna recovers in her hospital bed, Finn gently explains that the compound in her system may be altering her neurological responses. "We're trying to flesh it out," he says softly, "but it's bonded at a cellular level. It's rewriting your chemistry." Anna's voice cracks. "So I'm becoming something else?" He doesn't answer, and that silence is worse than any words. When Valentine visits, she tries to stay strong. "You shouldn't see me like this," she says weakly. He sits beside her, taking her hand. Anna Devane doesn't quit. "You've faced death, betrayal, loss, but you've never surrendered. And I'm not about to let you start now." She looks into his eyes, her own filled with fear and defiance. "Then help me fight it." Outside her room, Finn and Portia discuss their next move. "If we can trace the molecular design, maybe we can find the lab it came from," Finn says. Portia nods. "And if we find that lab, we'll find who did this."